The average white American's friends are 91% white. The average black American's friends are 83% black. Why is it that we only have friends who look like us? Is it a problem, or should we think about befriending others from other cultures as well? And if so, how do we do it? Thanks so much for joining us. I am Dustin.
I'm Eden.
And I'm Natalie.
And we're going to be talking about this together. We're super glad to have you. We're actually going to kickstart this discussion for about 20 minutes, and then we are going to invite you to continue it in an interactive Zoom discussion. If you're watching live, you can jump into the Zoom room and share your thoughts on this topic. We really look forward to hearing from you. If you're watching this after the fact, go ahead and leave a comment. Let us know. What are your thoughts? What's your experience along these lines? And so also, this is part one of a series on how to love people different than you. In this polarized country that we're living in, these are messages that desperately need to be heard. We're going to be talking about race. We're going to be talking about political preference. We're going to be talking about religious background. We're going to be talking about socioeconomic. We're going to be talking about people from a different generation or age than us. And so we believe that these conversations that we wrestle with together and with you are going to be transformative. And you probably know someone who could benefit from some of these things that you see and hear and participate in today. And so make sure you go ahead and share it. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe. You won't want to miss a single one in this series. And then share it with somebody who could really be benefited by it. So thank you so much for joining. We're super excited to talk about with you, how do I love someone well from a different race? I'm Pastor Dustin Serns. We are super stoked to have you join us for this.
3 words. Keep them.
You know, when the unexpected happens, let's jump into it. So, question then, if we talk about how 91% of a white American's friends are white. Now, if let's tease this out a little bit. If the average white American had 100 friends, 91 of them would be white, 1 would be black, 1 would be Latino, 1 would be Asian, 1 would be mixed race, 1 would be of another race, and 3 would be from an unknown race. Now, if we look on the other side of blacks, for example, 83 would be black, and they'd have 8 white friends. Now, possibly part of this would be that there are more whites in America, but definitely an improvement, but still very homogenous. 2 Latino friends, 0 Asian friends, 3 friends of mixed race, 1 friend from another race, and 4 of unknown race. So basically what we're seeing here from the research that's done by the Public Religion Research Institute recently is that Americans mainly associate almost exclusively with their own racial background. So the question would be, why is that, and why is it challenging for us to connect with people from other races in a really meaningful friendship and meaningful way? What do you guys think?
Well, we were talking about there's cultural barriers, language barriers, and people just really don't want to, a lot of times, step outside of their comfort zone, just want to hang out with people that sometimes talk similarly to them or look, have the same, eat the same foods, have kind of the same culture, I guess. So they just want to feel familiarity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why are we so drawn to familiarity? I think that's so true, right? We want to go to what's predictable or what's familiar.
Yeah.
Why are we so drawn to familiarity?
I wonder sometimes if it stems mostly from our childhood and the way that you were raised, the culture that you grew up in, the experience that you had as a young person is likely something that you're going to carry for the rest of your life with you. And so if you were raised as a white person in a primarily white neighborhood, you're most likely going to move into a familiar environment when you're looking for a house someday. Or if you grew up primarily around your own language group, you're most likely going to feel most familiar and connected with those who speak that same language as you. So I think a lot of people, at least here in the United States like to stick with what feels most comfortable to them and what feels most familiar or at home, some might say.
Yeah, I think that's so true. So the question is why? Like, why are we obsessed with what's familiar? Or why are we so attached to that? What's the deeper, what's going on deeper there?
I don't know. It's just, it's comfortable.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know, actually. To think about that. You guys have insights?
What
do you guys think?
Right. Right? Like, why is that? I mean, yeah, I think probably if we think about a deeper level, self-interest. We tend to be into ourselves rather than into other people. And what about fear? Do you see any connection with fear there?
Yeah, so a lot of times when we don't really know other cultures, I think, or not other cultures, but I mean just other things that we're not familiar with, that kind of sometimes breeds fear, and with that fear, then it just continues to grow, and we start to avoid those relationships or that particular thing, I think. So.
Yeah, it's in some sense it's the fear of the unknown, right? It's just different, and so we just kind of stay where it's safe, stay where it's familiar. How do we break out of that? I mean, have any of you had an experience where you broke out, had to that really kind of moved you forward in that kind of opened your eyes, or kind of a transforming experience?
Yeah, I can think of one. When I was in college, I had the opportunity to go over to the Middle East and actually study in Jerusalem, which was really exciting. I was studying the language of Hebrew there in the place where people speak that language still to this day. And in my experience of getting ready to go on this trip, I had so many people telling me, oh my goodness, you're going to the Middle East. Oh, you're traveling over to this dangerous place of the world, because at that time in the United States, in the media, the Middle East was portrayed as a dangerous place to go, and that it was not safe as a tourist to travel to that area. As a student, it wasn't safe to go there. And so I was constantly being hit with these ideas that the Middle East is unsafe, people from the Middle East are unsafe. But when I actually went there, and I lived in this place for a period of time and traveled around to different countries in that region, I discovered something completely different than the fears that I had seen back home of this place and of these people. And what I experienced was incredible hospitality in a culture that was very different than my own, but showed me hospitality in just a beautiful way. For example, during the month of Ramadan, which is when Muslims in their faith will fast for various reasons for a period of time, we would be going around, walking around the neighborhoods, and families would invite us into their home. Complete strangers. We are complete strangers from a foreign land in their home, and they would invite us in, and they would make these grand meals, feed us tons and tons of food. Even though they were fasting themselves, they would share just incredible hospitality with us, have us meet their children, they would teach us things, and have this just incredible friendship building experience. And that experience just taught me that these things that I had been hearing growing up were just completely wrong. And were a very narrow-minded view, I think, of this place in the world and the various cultures and language groups that were there. And so I came home with just a completely different perspective, and it really opened my eyes to the beauty that lies in exploring the world and traveling and meeting people that are different from you and making friends that are different from you.
Wow, that is such a powerful experience and so relevant today, right? So you were, if I can just camp out on this for a second, you were trained by your race and your culture to have a certain kind of view or stereotype of another race, right? Yeah. And the truth is that all of us are. Every single one of us is trained to view certain people certain ways, whether we realize it or not, whether we are. And so what shattered that stereotype was going and having an interaction with somebody else, and they were totally unlike what you'd been told. And so it's so profound. What a life-changing experience. You touch on two things that are very interesting, and I want to pull these out for a little bit here. Is what are the dangers of not having close friendships with people of other race? Because we obviously know that it comes naturally to not do that. But what risks or danger are we running? What are we missing out on as well by not doing that if we don't do that?
Well, I think Natalie was talking about how it just broadened her perspectives, but it also taught her about all the similarities that she found with those people, the kind of values. I mean, just the hospitality, I think we all traveled and we have all experienced that amazing hospitality in those different cultures. I practice fasting, and when I do on those days, I can't even cook for my own family. And they're fasting for a super long time, and they're cooking for guests and strangers. Strangers. So that's pretty amazing. But I think the dangers of not developing those relationships or just encountering those different cultures is that it can make you narrow-minded and not open to other people's viewpoints or beliefs. And it can also actually, I think, strengthen your own beliefs too, and strengthen your own values, and just really help you develop just better connections with different people too. I think when you broaden your perspectives, it helps you connect with so many different cultures, right? I mean, even have you experienced because I know you studied abroad too, but I studied abroad in Spain, but I think just living in a different culture, and I lived in Korea for a bit and Peru for a bit, but I feel like you can just almost understand, like when I see different patients with different cultures, even though they might not be the culture that, like, they might not have that Spanish culture, I still feel like I can almost empathize with them in a way that I wasn't able to before.
Wow. So it kind of opens up your viewpoint to learning so much more about the world, like as if you're flying through a tiny valley, and then all of a sudden you go up above the mountains and you can see the whole landscape.
It's a great way to describe it.
Yeah. Like Natalie, what does somebody have to gain from really loving somebody from a different race?
So much. I think God has given us the gift of diversity in this world for a reason. He didn't make us look all the same. He didn't make us look the same and like all the same things and act exactly the same. And he is a God of beauty and diversity. We see that when we look in nature. We see that all around us, in the plants and the animals that surround us, and it's also present in humanity. And so I think it's something that he intended for us to enjoy and to celebrate, and not for it to be something that tears us apart. And yet, sometimes it becomes that. It becomes something that we let rip us apart because of our opinions and our different views and our assumptions. We've kind of mentioned stereotypes that we might hold. And sometimes we might tend to think that, well, because someone's different than me, or they speak a different language or have a different culture, I can't connect with them. And so I'm only going to stick with my group, and I'm going to make assumptions about what that group must be like and the things that I don't like about them. But as we've seen, the more that you interact and the more that you build friendships across those dividing lines, build those bridges, the more you will start to see, hey, we're not all that different. We might have different cultures and different customs. We might have grown up with different foods. We might speak different languages. We might wear different types of clothing, might have different histories. But when we come together, we can see, hey, we've got some of the same values. We value family. We value trust. We value friendships and relationships. And when we can see how those things play out in someone else's life experience, we often will learn something new and gain a new perspective, even learn something new about God and the way that God interacts with us as people.
Wow, that is so true and so profound. It makes me think of a Bible verse in 1 John chapter 4, and it says, "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God." Right? We have to acknowledge that you and I can't conjure up within ourselves enough good vibes to be able to love, to be able to breach this, right? Like, we can think we do, we can have good feelings or niceness or whatever, but true love comes from God, right? Love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. That means that if we do this, this is evidence that God is working in our life. Uh-oh. So what happens if we don't do this? All right. But anyway, going to verse 11, "Dear friends, since God loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us." Okay, did you catch that?
There you go.
He lives in us, and then his love is made complete in us. That means that God is in me, in all of us, plural, and his love is made complete in not me, not the individualistic culture but in all of us. So as we connect with somebody from another race and another culture, another background, we have to connect with people who are different than us in order to see a different picture of God. In order for us to experience a different flavor, different vantage point of God's love. And that's so profound. And that's really what compels us to say, hey, it's not just that we want to do this, and yeah, this is going to broaden our worldview, but man, I've got to do this because I want to see another picture of God, and God wants me to do this too. Eden, what is it? I mean, how do you get the courage to step? You talked about how it can be fearful to step out and initiate this. Like, how does someone get the courage to actually love someone from another race? Let's start making this practical here.
So yeah, I think there's the practical parts is like, we gotta be more intentional or take a personal inventory of, what our friends look like.
That's
are
challenging.
All my friends, do they look like me?
Eden, you're making it real here. You're making it real.
But there's also, I think, a perspective that I think even from our own efforts, we a lot of times we're kind of lazy and we like to just sit on the couch and be comfortable. And I think we're talking about that when we look at the example of what Jesus said for us. Jesus says, he gives the disciples a new commandment, like love one another as I have loved you. And if we look at how Jesus loved others and he sought out these relationships, he looked for that woman, the Samaritan woman at the well. I think it's something that as we continue to develop our relationship with God, we see his amazing love and his amazing love for, everyone. And I think this is going to be a constant theme that we're going to talk about. And that's going to kind of help you encourage and get over that fear of just taking, stepping outside of your comfort zone. I think that's something that we have to pray to God about, and he's going to help you get over that fear. And there's a Bible verse I mentioned, I can't remember, I think it's in 1 John 14, but it says perfect love casts out fear. And God is love, and I think as we continue to have God and get to know God's love in our hearts, that's just going to be something that spreads, and it's going to help us be intentional.
Wow, that's so true. I heard you say we can be intentional. We can take inventory and see, hey, who am I hanging out with, and who am I not hanging out with, and how can we change that? We can ask God, for courage and for his love to come into our hearts to love other people. We can, in an intangible way, we can enter new environments to meet new people. We see it kind of usually follows the progression of association, conversation, friendship, attitudes. And we want to hit that final stage of attitudes that these people are impacting how we view the world. And what's really interesting is that so many people are. The sad part about today is that so much of this racial polarization has even crept into the church communities as well. But what I find really fascinating, it's certainly not perfect, but the most diverse denomination in the United States is actually the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, Christian
It's news to me.
denomination, and
Yeah.
and they're so diverse. In fact, I believe that the top representation is white, which is 37%. And then the other, which is not even a majority, right?
Yeah.
That's just a plurality. And then I think black was 32%. It's only 5 percentage points less. And then Latino and Asian and other races. So I mean, we find really diverse representation there. And so one opportunity is, if we have a hard time finding diversity in our local community, oftentimes we can find it in a church. Not always, it depends on the church, right? But that would be one other space. How can we enter in new environments that give opportunities for diversity, right? Let's, as we kind of wrap up this discussion, let's get personal here for a second, and because this is not just a challenging topic, this is not just a needed topic, but it's also a topic with serious pain or struggle. For so many people, or scars even. Let's make this personal. What is this, when you think about this whole idea of loving people from other races, what does this look like in your lives and what you're thinking about?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we all have had some personal experience that has related to this. I know, at least in my life, I'm in an interracial relationship. And so being in a relationship with someone who is of a different background than me, that grew up in a different country than I did, that speaks languages I don't speak yet, that I'm learning, it takes a lot of learning and understanding and patience and God to work in your heart, so that you can understand each other and come together. And something that this past year we have thought and talked about a lot in our relationship is raising children in the future. Mm-hmm. And what is that going to look like? Because the world right now is kind of a scary place, and especially for children who will be of mixed race and who will look very different from me, for example. So as a white mother, I have had to think a lot about, when I have children someday, they're not going to look like me. Mm. And people might make assumptions. They might assume, oh, those are adopted children. They're not her biological children. They might say unkind things that I never heard growing up as a kid, because my experience, I know, will be different than what they might experience growing up in this country and in this world. And so I've had to do a lot of that self-examination and that self-work of thinking about, how do I want to raise my kids someday to be strong young people who know that they are rooted in God and that they're loved, and also help them figure out how to deal with some of these tensions that are out there in the world. And I guess thinking about that, I wanted to ask you what your experience has been since you do have kids. What has that been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm in a biracial relationship. My wife's white, and my kids honestly look probably more Asian. they're stronger Asian, but I think it's been kind of eye-opening from my wife. I don't think she ever grew up with being discriminated for her race, but one time I got a 4-year-old girl, but one time she was and a 2-year-old boy, and they were playing in a playground, and I think an older kid said something derogatory towards her race, toward my daughter's race, and I think that was the first time Brina realized, oh wow, like this might be something my kids might have to deal with in the future, and it hurt her a lot, and we were talking about it, and my wife was kind of tearing up, and but we're also sad about that older boy, because he's gonna have that, continue to grow up with that mindset, and hopefully he opens up his mindset for him to just experience life in a better, fuller way, and and I think that opportunity starts with us right now, and how we seek out those relationships, how we continue to cultivate those relationships, and being more intentional with opening our minds, and just creating a kind of a loving environment in the world. It's something that it's good that you're thinking about for your kids, but we need to continue to do, for Sure.
It's so helpful to realize that we're not entering into these other, biracial friendships or interracial friendships in a vacuum or in a neutral environment. Many have pain and scars, and have been called things that should have never been called, and so we have the opportunity to show love. We have the opportunity to give them, to basically be part of the healing and the solution to those things. And you talk about your kids someday, you talk about your kids and how much it hurts you for your kids to be mistreated or ignored or left out. And I think about how much does it hurt God for his kids to be mistreated or ignored or left out? And isn't it just the heart of God to just say, I love these people. I want my people to go show them love, to go become their friends, to go give them a taste of the kingdom. There's an awesome verse in Revelation 7, verse 9, that casts a vision of what our future is going to look like when in God's kingdom in heaven after Jesus comes. And it says, after this I looked before me, and there was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne in front of the Lamb. And they were wearing white robes and holding palm branches in their hands, and they cried out in a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. And everyone falls down and worship before God, every nation, tribe, language, and people.
Awesome.
And God says that his kingdom is an interracial community. We don't give up our race. We embrace it for eternity. It's an interracial community that loves each other and that worships God. And God invites us to give a taste of his kingdom to the people around us in our everyday lives today. Let's pray together. God, you're awesome. We want to taste that kingdom that you have for us. We want to be part of it. We want to love like you love, and we want to go to others who are different than us so that you can broaden our minds and give us a picture of you that is different than what we've ever seen before. And so, Lord, grow our courage, grow our faith, grow our love, and send us out to make a difference for you. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, we started the conversation. We want to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts? Help us out. What do you think? What's your experience with this? What are the challenges? What have been the breakthroughs for you? What are the practical ways that have helped you in this? We want to hear your thoughts. Reflect with us. Come, jump in right now into a 20-minute Zoom discussion. We're going to put the meeting ID right here on the screen. Also, or you can go to the comments. You can click on the link just for 20 minutes on Zoom. Jump in, click the link, open up Zoom, put in the meeting ID, whatever you want to do. But you can jump in and we'll have this discussion together of what are your thoughts on this. And you can share your thoughts, you can share your questions, you can share your challenges, you can share your experiences, or you can just join and listen in. Be a fly on the wall and let other people talk about it. Whatever you would like to do, whatever your comfort level. But we grow best when we grow together. And so we want to grow with you, and we can't wait to hear what you have to say with our team here. And so jump in right now, and thank you so much for joining and watching, and we look forward to continuing the discussion right now and also next weekend with as we continue these conversations of how to love people different than you.